It is 1972. The Beatles have broken up. Man has walked on the moon. The world is full of peace signs and protests against Vietnam. But on a tiny, humid island in the Philippines, it is still 1945. A man crouches in the thick underbrush, his eyes scanning the tree line. His uniform is rags, patched together with jungle fibers. His rifle, however, is spotless. He is hunting. Not animals, but enemy soldiers. He doesn't know the enemy went home decades ago. This is Lubang Island. The man is Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, an intelligence officer of the Imperial Japanese Army. He was deployed here in December 1944. As the American forces closed in, his division commander gave him a final set of orders that would seal his fate for the next 30 years. Those orders echoed in Onoda's mind every single day. They were the foundation of his reality. The commander had looked him in the eye and said, "You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens, we'll come back for you. Until then, so long as you have one soldier, you are to continue to lead him." Onoda took those words literally. He believed them with every fiber of his being. When the Americans landed in early 1945, the main Japanese force was quickly crushed, or surrendered. Onoda and 3 other soldiers, Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, and Private First Class Kinshichi Kozuka, fled into the dense interior of the island. The jungle became their world. It was a suffocating green blanket. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of rotting vegetation. Every snap of a twig sounded like an approaching enemy patrol. They lived like ghosts, moving constantly, never sleeping in the same place twice. From their high vantage points in the mountains, they watched the massive American armada fill the horizon. They saw the landing craft. They heard the distant thunder of artillery. Then, months later, the ships began to leave. The heavy bombing stopped. They found the first leaflets in late 1945. The paper was damp from the morning dew. It read, "The war ended on August 15th. Come down from the mountains." Akatsu, the youngest, looked at the paper with wide eyes. "Lieutenant, it says Japan surrendered." Onoda snatched the paper from his hand and crumpled it. Lies. It's Allied propaganda to trick us into capturing ourselves. Months turned into years. The massive American warships disappeared completely, replaced by local fishing boats and merchant vessels. To Onoda, this was just a change in enemy tactics. The enemy was trying to lull them into complacency. The war hadn't ended. It had just gone underground. They continued their guerrilla mission. They sabotaged local farm equipment. They burned harvested rice fields to deny the enemy supplies. They sometimes shot at local villagers they mistook for disguised soldiers. Survival was a brutal, daily grind. They stole bananas and coconuts from local farms. They killed the occasional cow for meat, drying the beef in the sun to preserve it. The tropical rain never seemed to stop. It rotted their boots and rusted their equipment. They were constantly starving, sick with tropical fevers, and perpetually hunted by local police patrols. The psychological pressure was immense. In his diary, Onoda later reflected on this period. He wrote, "We were fighting a war that existed only in our minds, but to us it was absolute reality. Every day was a test of willpower." By 1949, the strain was becoming too much for Private Akatsu. He became distant, muttering to himself. One evening during a heavy downpour, he looked at Onoda. "How long, Lieutenant? How long do we wait?" Onoda didn't look up from cleaning his rifle bolt. "Until the Major returns. Those are the orders." 6 months later, Akatsu vanished in the night. He surrendered to the local Philippine authorities. The remaining 3 saw this as the ultimate betrayal. Akatsu was a traitor. Worse, he knew their hideouts. They immediately moved deeper into the most inaccessible parts of the mountains, becoming even more paranoid. They were now convinced that any search parties trying to find them, even Japanese ones yelling through loudspeakers, were tricks supplied by the traitor Akatsu. Years bled into decades. In 1954, Corporal Shimada was killed in a shootout with a local search party on a beach. Now there were only 2, Onoda and Kozuka. They became like brothers, bound by a shared delusion and the harsh reality of jungle survival. They kept each other sane. They reinforced each other's belief that the war was still raging somewhere just beyond the horizon. It was October 1972, nearly 28 years since Onoda first stepped onto the island. He and Corporal Kozuka were near a village, intending to burn some rice stalks as part of their ongoing guerrilla campaign. A Philippine police patrol spotted the smoke. Shots rang out suddenly. The crack of rifles was deafening in the quiet jungle afternoon. Kozuka yelled out in surprise. He stumbled forward. A dark stain bloomed rapidly on his chest. Onoda immediately returned fire, the brass casings from his Arisaka rifle ejecting wildly into the mud. He grabbed Kozuka by the webbing of his gear, dragging him backward into the dense brush. But the corporal went limp in his arms. Onoda checked for a pulse. There was nothing. The shooting stopped as the police retreated, wary of an ambush. Onoda was completely alone. He sat in the mud next to the body of his last comrade. The silence of the jungle returned, heavier and louder than before. He stared at Kozuka's face. 30 years of loyalty and hardship had ended in a muddy ditch on a foreign island. He buried Kozuka and continued the mission. He was truly the last ghost now. He fought on for nearly 2 more years, entirely by himself. He spoke to no one. He trusted no one. Then, in February 1974, everything changed. A young Japanese university dropout and adventurer named Norio Suzuki arrived on the island. He had a strange personal goal: to find Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman in that order. Suzuki headed into the jungle, unarmed, shouting Onoda's name. Astonishingly, he found him. Onoda stepped out of the shadows, his rifle leveled at the young intruder. But Suzuki didn't flinch. He just started talking. He told Onoda about modern Japan, about the economic boom, about how the war had been over for decades. Onoda listened, but he would not budge. "I am a soldier," he told the young man. "I only take orders from my superior officer." Suzuki realized the only way to end this was to play by Onoda's rules. He returned to Japan with photographs proving Onoda was alive. The Japanese government launched a search for Onoda's old commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. They found him. He was an old man now, working quietly in a bookstore. March 9th, 1974. A small clearing in the Lubang jungle. The air was tense. Hiroo Onoda stood rigid in his tattered, rotting uniform. Despite the filth, his posture was perfect military attention. He held his Arisaka rifle across his chest. It was perfectly maintained, shining with oil. Major Taniguchi, dressed in an ill-fitting uniform brought for the occasion, stepped forward. He looked at the gaunt, wild-eyed man before him. With a trembling voice, he read the official dismissal order, relieving Lieutenant Onoda of all duties. Onoda listened intently to every word. When the major finished, Onoda bowed deeply. He stepped forward and surrendered his rifle. He then surrendered his officer's sword, his ammunition pouch, and his dagger. The adrenaline that had sustained him for 29 years evaporated in a single second. The 52-year-old soldier broke down and wept openly. The long war was finally over. When he returned to Japan, he was greeted by a massive crowd of thousands waving flags. He was a national sensation, but the Japan he returned to was unrecognizable to him. The values of stoicism and absolute loyalty he had lived by seemed to have vanished in a wave of consumerism and modernization. He struggled to adapt. He had lived 30 years in a delusion built of honor, and the reality of peace was harder to accept than the imaginary war. If stories of unbelievable human endurance and historical anomalies fascinate you, please subscribe. We dig deep into the archives to find the forgotten voices of history. Hiroo Onoda was a hero to some, a tragic relic to others. He was a man who proved that the most powerful prison is not made of iron bars, but of belief.